Do you want to just share about what you'll be talking about your father and your uncle for tonight?
Okay. My father and uncle are from Poland, and they're the only two members of our Jewish family who had not immigrated before the war to survive the Holocaust. My father survived in the concentration camp system in several camps, including the infamous Auschwitz camp. And my uncle survived by passing as a Catholic Pole amongst Poles in various venues, which included becoming a member of an anti-Semitic but anti-Nazi Polish partisan group, and eventually he became an officer in the Polish army.
What message do you want people to get from your family's survival of the Holocaust?
Well, to understand the story about the people who suffered and the people who were resilient enough to get through it. It's my family story. To be honest, I don't have any particular mission in telling the story. I'm just pleased that people are interested in doing that. Right now, since my father passed away many years ago and my uncle is not doing very well, he's 96 years old, I'm the one who's left to tell our family story, and I'm happy to tell it to whoever is willing to listen.
That's awesome. So you've taught for 34 years. What advice do you have for students?
What advice do I have for students? I would say try to have a balanced college education. Take the opportunity that you may never have again to learn as much as you can. The other side of the balance is to prepare yourself for whatever career that you want. I see, or have seen, a lot of students who only focus on the latter, and maybe specialize a little bit too early. So try to get a balance between a broad education and a career-oriented curriculum.
And could you kind of explain some of the focuses that you've been to college for? I see that you have your PhD and
you mean what my education was?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I grew up in Los Angeles. I was born in 1951. At the time, I thought Los Angeles was the center of the universe. And so I stayed at UCLA through my bachelor's, master's, and PhD degree. And in part, I helped in our family business, and I was the oldest son, and they needed me. But all my degrees were in sociology. When I got my bachelor's degree in sociology, at the time, probably law school would have been the other alternative, but I enjoyed teaching, and I was a college-age student, so I thought I would enjoy teaching people like myself. So that's what I did, and I love sociology. I like learning. I like ideas, and it's been a privilege to make a living in this society by doing that.
So what advice do you have for young teachers and professors?
Teachers and professors. That's a complicated question because the whole field is a lot different than it used to be. There are serious cuts around the country, including in academia in Wisconsin, in the field. So I guess be prepared to be geographically mobile. I mean, I came from Los Angeles, California to Wisconsin. So if you have a broad geographical perspective and don't feel that you have to settle within 100 miles from your parents and your extended family, then you'll be able to, to get a job. And it's a different climate now. I would really have to have an extended conversation with a new person about what it was like for me and what it will be like to you. One of the things, kind of to be honest, that attracted me about the field was the flexibility in my workday, and the autonomy that I have. That's increasingly being eroded. The guarantee of tenure at some point in my career, that's being eroded. And those were some, besides the ideas and loving sociology, those were some of the kind of the practical things that I thought would enhance my lifestyle that are not necessarily there anymore.
So why is it so important for professors that are both good in research and teaching?
Why is it so? Why is it important?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think they're interrelated. You know, I wouldn't say somebody who does research is necessarily not as good of a teacher, and some could be even better teachers. You know, I've known some of the best teachers who used to be high school teachers, and they've transferred into college as they advanced in their career. So I think if you're doing research, you're more likely to stay up to date on what's happening because you have to, and you're more intimately familiar with the process of producing knowledge and what are more of the nuances of the field. But, you know, to be honest, when you're teaching undergraduates, often they don't know the difference. you know, so, you know, I mean, you can be a good teacher either way you go.
So you share your story about the Nazi camp and all that. Do you have any other like research that you have done?
Oh yes, I actually started out in what I would call sociological criminology, because criminology itself is an interdisciplinary field that includes things that aren't sociology, like, you know, forensics and things like that. That's my main area of training. I also was trained in sociological theory, which one thing good about that, I really am prepared to be a generalist. But when I got involved in my father and uncle's story, and this was something that happened to me later in life, they did not talk about their story in any detail to anyone for 40 years. And what started out as kind of a family genealogy project emerged into something more, and I retrained in Holocaust studies so that I could do sociological work and be more broadly knowledgeable about the Holocaust. A few years later, I developed an interest in disability because my daughter, who was born in 1993, had a disability. And just as I took the Holocaust situation and transferred a personal interest into a professional project and field of expertise, I did that with disability studies. So my first research project in disabilities focused on the life of a African-American man from Chicago who was involved in Chicago gangs and was shot and paralyzed in 1986 in a gang dispute. And another story of resilience, and he ended up coming to my university to play wheelchair basketball. And we have, along with, I must give credit to the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, the best collegiate wheelchair basketball programs in the entire world. I don't know if you're familiar with the Paralympics, you know, and Melvin, this man that I was just describing, was the first person from our university to make it to the Paralympics. And I did a book about his life, and that was an entry into a broader study of wheelchair basketball players, and I did that. And then as a result of that work, I was approached by another man who had gotten a bachelor's and a master's degree from my university at Whitewater. And he has a rather significant form of cerebral palsy where he has impairment in all of his limbs. He can type with one hand, and he cannot speak without the use of a computerized communication device. And he approached me knowing that I had written a book about another Whitewater student. And he said, well, would you help me write a book about my life? And it was almost as if he was like interviewing for me for a job for which I would not get paid. And he said, well, you know, Melvin, he uses a wheelchair, but he has full functionality, and there's really nothing he can do, which is what this other individual, John Foyt, said. He said, Melvin's not even disabled. Why don't you write a book about somebody who's... So I did that, and this man had founded a summer camp at my university now, I'd say about 15 years ago, for young people who also need to and are using augmentative communication devices. So they come once a week from all over the country to my university, my little university, to learn how to or to become efficient at using their. So I did a project in that milieu. Well, the first thing I would say is that most people in our society and probably the world know most of what they know about history through films produced in Hollywood. And to start, probably the first major film about the Holocaust was The Diary of Anne Frank. You know, and before the actual Academy Award nominated film, Diary of Anne Frank, in the late 50s, there was a hit Broadway play on Diary of Anne Frank. Nobody would really know about Anne Frank if it was not for the Hollywood productions. You know, we sometimes assume that a diary by a little girl would become this big thing. I mean, Anne Frank is one of the three most well-known people of the Holocaust. The other is Adolf Hitler, and now, to get to some other films in a moment, is Oskar Schindler. So, you know, in some sense, Anne's not a central figure in the Holocaust, but her story is very meaningful to people, particularly young people, and it offered a safe way to get into the subject matter because, you know, she's in the attic, and the film productions, and of course the diary itself, never follow up what happened to her, except for one a few years ago. And there's been so many different versions of the Diary of Anne Frank. A few years ago, I think it was about a 4-hour kind of mini series on television, which was the only time they actually took you in the story into the concentration camp and watch Anne with her sister Margot, watch Margot die, and leaving you to see Anne on the brink of death. And I think to see that would give people a different meaning of, you know, what happened. But she's become so symbolic. She was a young person with so much promise, and she represents all the children of the Holocaust. The other, I think, significant television program was the 1978 airing of the 9-hour docudrama called The Holocaust. And people of my generation would remember it well. The 1970s was an era in which the cultural phenomenon of genealogy and family roots and things like that emerged, and there are complex sociological reasons for why that. But prior to the Holocaust docudrama was the airing, really the first television miniseries docudrama called Roots, based on Alex Haley's book, which was a story about an African-American family from slavery. That 1978 Holocaust docudrama, a lot of critics, you know, thought it was kind of, you know, kitschy, not high quality. But for me, it was very important. To be honest, I was born in '51. That was my first major engagement with the Holocaust. The storylines, which followed a Jewish family and a German Nazi family, it really was a simple introductory history to everything that happened. And it was viewed by 120 million people in the United States alone, and it was disseminated worldwide. So more people learned about the Holocaust from that television program than all the history books, you know, that were ever written about it. Then I would say the next major breakthrough would be Schindler's List, which was aired in 1993. In fact, I would add that 1993 was also the year in which the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum was opened up in Washington, D.C. And when I compare what people of your generation were at least aware of the Holocaust versus like my generation, like there's before Schindler's List and there's after Schindler's List, because it played a major role. You know, on the other hand, Oskar Schindler, he's a very minor figure in the story of the Holocaust, and now he's in the trilogy with Adolf Hitler and Anne Frank as the most well-known person. So, you know, that's kind of the downside, you know, of it. I mean, there have, of course, been other movies, but I think, you know, those are some of the most significant ones. The one thing that I would note too, sociologically, looking at the themes of the Diary of Anne Frank and Schindler's List, the storylines contain elements by which Good Samaritan Christians helped Jews. And I think that's very significant in why that kind of theme, you know, was attractive to non-Jewish audiences, which are, of course, the bulk of the audiences who, you know, watch films, you know, because it gave the Christian population, you know, a way of accessing the Holocaust by focusing on people who did good. You know, there's never been a film made about Holocaust where the central character kind of was, well, I shouldn't say there's never been a film, as popular film, where the central character was, you know, an active, with the exception of Defiance, which you may have seen, which is a group of Jewish resistance fighters. Although noteworthy, Defiance never became the film that people are aware of, even though it was actually more of an action film than some of the others. So those are some of my observations about Hollywood.